Mark had imagined moving day differently. He pictured a calm afternoon, boxes stacked neatly on the front porch, the scent of fresh paint still lingering in the air, neighbors waving hello with warm smiles. Instead, as he wrestled the last stubborn crate into his new living room, a sharp knock echoed through the quiet house. He opened the door to find Karen, a woman in her early 50s, dressed in a crisp, starched blouse and a severe skirt, with icy eyes that seemed to pierce right through him. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She held a clipboard like a weapon. "Mr. Thompson, right?" she asked without a hint of warmth. "Yes, that's me," Mark replied, cautiously stepping aside. "I'm Karen Miller, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association," she announced, voice clipped and commanding. "I'm here to inform you that you are already in violation of several community rules." Mark blinked. "Violations? I just moved in today." Karen's gaze didn't soften. "First, your lawn is uneven, which breaches Section 4.2 of the HOA guidelines. Then your mailbox is the wrong style. It must be the black wrought iron model approved last year. And your welcome mat? Definitely not the approved color scheme." Mark's eyebrows rose in disbelief. "I don't even have a mailbox yet, and the lawn was just seeded. I haven't done any landscaping." Karen tapped her pen against the clipboard. "Ignorance of the rules is not an excuse. As a homeowner here, you are required to comply immediately or face fines." Mark swallowed hard, feeling a cold pit open in his stomach. This wasn't the friendly welcome he had hoped for. Karen's eyes flicked to the street, where a few neighbors peeked from behind curtains or through open blinds, their expressions guarded. "I understand you want to settle in, but rules are rules," Karen said. "If you don't address these issues by the end of the week, the HOA will take further action." Before Mark could respond, Karen's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at him with a thin, almost predatory smile. "Excuse me," she said, turning on her heel. "You'll hear from me soon." The door clicked shut behind her. Mark closed the door, heart racing. What kind of neighborhood was this? He stepped back and glanced at his house, suddenly feeling like an intruder in his own home. Later that night, Mark sat on the couch, the boxes still unopened around him. His phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Welcome to Willow Creek. We watch out for each other. Be careful." He stared at the screen, unease settling like fog. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the trees lining the street, Mark noticed a flyer slipped under his front door, a thick pamphlet titled HOA Rules and Regulations. The front page was emblazoned with Karen's name and the HOA's logo. Mark flipped through the pages, his fingers trembling slightly. The rules were endless and exhaustive. Everything from lawn care to the precise angle of window blinds was dictated. The language felt less like guidelines and more like chains. Across the street, Karen was already inspecting another house, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp as a hawk. Mark watched her for a moment, then turned back inside. But deep down, a new feeling was stirring. This was no ordinary HOA president. Karen was a force, and Mark had just stepped into her crosshairs. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Mark's phone buzzed again. Another message. "Some rules are meant to be broken. Just don't get caught." He shivered. Mark didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of a conflict that would shake the entire neighborhood and uncover secrets darker than any lawn violation. Mark woke up the next morning feeling a tight knot of anxiety in his chest. The sun streamed through his bedroom window, casting long shadows across the freshly unpacked boxes that still cluttered the room. He tried to shake off the uneasy feeling from last night's strange messages, but the unease clung stubbornly. Outside, the neighborhood was already stirring. Children laughed somewhere down the street, and distant lawnmowers hummed softly. But Mark's eyes couldn't help drifting to Karen's house. Her front porch looked immaculate, her rose bushes trimmed to precise perfection. No detail escaped her watchful gaze. As he stepped outside to get some fresh air, Karen appeared like clockwork, clipboard in hand. She strode across the street with her usual brisk confidence, eyes scanning Mark's property like a judge ready to deliver a verdict. "Morning, Mark," she called out, voice sharp but carefully polite. "I noticed your lawn still has some bare patches. Have you scheduled landscaping yet? Mark swallowed. I'm waiting for the grass to grow. It was just seeded last week. Karen's gaze hardened. The HOA guidelines state that lawns must be maintained at all times, even during the growing phase. You'll need to cover those patches with approved ground cover immediately. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll have to report this to the board. Mark frowned. Cover bare soil. That's unusual. Karen didn't answer. Instead, she took out her phone and snapped a quick photo of Mark's front yard. I'm just doing my job, she said, voice cold. Days passed, and Karen's visits became more frequent, each time more intrusive. She measured his bushes with a ruler, inspected his driveway for cracks, and even took notes about the color of his porch light. Neighbors watched silently from behind their curtains or over fences, their faces a mix of sympathy and fear. One afternoon, Mark was watering his newly planted flowers when Karen appeared again, this time with 2 other women, their expressions as stern as hers. Mr. Thompson, Karen said, arms crossed, we've received multiple complaints about unauthorized decorations on your porch. Halloween lights aren't allowed this early in the season, according to Section 7.5. Mark blinked. I haven't put up any decorations. Karen's smile was thin and sharp. It's been reported. You'll need to remove them immediately. If you don't, the HOA will issue a fine. Mark felt his frustration boiling over. This is ridiculous. I haven't even lived here long enough to decorate. Karen leaned in, voice lowering just enough to be chilling. Rules are rules. We all must follow them, especially newcomers. That night, Mark sat at his kitchen table, a stack of HOA pamphlets and letters piling up around him. The costs of fines, the never-ending lists of what was allowed and what wasn't. It was suffocating. His dream home was turning into a cage. Just as he was about to close the pamphlets, his phone buzzed again. You're stirring the pot. Be careful who you trust. Mark's heart skipped a beat. He looked out the window and saw a shadowy figure slipping away down the street, disappearing into the growing dusk. Mark's pulse quickened. This was more than a simple HOA dispute. Someone was watching him, someone who wanted him to back down. But Mark wasn't ready to give up. He made a decision then and there. He would find out exactly what Karen was up to and why she seemed so determined to make his life miserable. The sky had darkened to a slate gray by the time Mark locked up his toolbox after finishing some minor repairs on his porch. The quiet neighborhood was settling in for the evening, the occasional sound of a car passing by, the distant hum of cicadas in the trees. Mark was tired, but satisfied with his progress. At least something about his new home was going right. Then, suddenly, a sharp ring at the door shattered the calm. Mark opened it to find Karen standing on his doorstep, her face set in a severe expression that made his stomach twist with dread. You need to come with me, she said, voice low but urgent. What? Why? Mark asked, confused. Karen didn't answer. Instead, she reached for her phone and made a quick call. Minutes later, Mark heard the telltale sirens. 2 police cars pulled up, lights flashing silently in the dusk. Officers stepped out, their faces cautious but professional. Karen took the lead, pointing at Mark's house. This man is trespassing on HOA property and violating local ordinances. Mark's mouth went dry. Trespassing? I own this house. Karen's gaze was sharp as a knife. You're on HOA common land. The driveway extends beyond your property lines. One of the officers stepped forward, clipboard in hand. Sir, do you have proof of ownership? Mark dug into his pocket and pulled out the deed and the property survey. The officer examined the documents carefully. This clearly shows your boundaries, the officer said, looking up at Karen. If you believe there's a dispute, it's a civil matter. Karen's jaw tightened, but she didn't relent. The HOA has rules that must be enforced immediately. The officers exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. Finally, one said, Sir, please remain calm. We're just here to make sure everything is in order. Karen continued to push, whispering urgently in the officer's ear. Mark noticed the growing tension. the way Karen's eyes darted around as if expecting something or someone. Then, without warning, Karen took a step closer to Mark. "You will comply," she hissed. Mark's pulse quickened. This was no longer just a neighborhood spat. Karen was weaponizing the law against him. As the officers looked on, Karen insisted they issue a warning, an official HOA complaint that could escalate to fines or worse. Mark felt the walls closing in. When the officers finally left, Karen lingered by the curb, eyes blazing. "Consider this your final warning," she said coldly. "Next time, the police won't be so forgiving." Mark closed the door behind her, heart pounding like a drum. The house suddenly felt smaller, colder. He sank onto his couch, staring at the glowing phone screen. A new message blinked in his inbox. "You're on thin ice. Walk carefully." Mark's mind raced. Why was Karen so obsessed with punishing him? What was her endgame? He knew he couldn't back down now, not without risking everything. But something still didn't add up. Why was Karen going so far when Mark wasn't even sure if he belonged to her HOA? The question gnawed at him, a dark seed of doubt that would soon grow into something much bigger. After the tense encounter with the police, Mark's resolve hardened. This wasn't just about petty rules or Karen's obsession with control. Something was seriously wrong. If Karen was so determined to punish him, maybe she wasn't playing by the rules. Mark spent the next day at the local government offices, poring over public records, zoning maps, and property documents. He scanned every page with growing disbelief. His name was on the deed, of course. He owned the house. But when he pulled the HOA membership list, his name was nowhere to be found. Not only that, the official boundaries of the Willow Creek HOA didn't include his street. Mark's fingers trembled as he traced the lines on the map. His house sat just outside the official HOA jurisdiction. He wasn't a member. He wasn't bound by their rules. None of Karen's threats or fines should even apply to him. So why had Karen targeted him so aggressively? As Mark sat back in his chair, a knot of confusion and anger tangled in his stomach. Had Karen made a simple mistake? Or was this a deliberate act of harassment? He recalled her chilling parting words the night the police came. "Consider this your final warning." Mark's mind raced. Could Karen be trying to expand her HOA's power illegally? Or was she punishing him for something else entirely? Determined to get to the bottom of it, Mark reached out to a few neighbors, quiet residents who had watched the tension unfold but stayed silent. A woman named Linda, whose house was 2 doors down, agreed to meet him at a local cafe. "I've lived here for 15 years, she said quietly, sipping her coffee. "Karen's always been difficult, but lately she's gotten worse. She's overstepping, pushing rules on people who aren't even in the HOA. We're scared to speak up." Mark leaned in. "Do you think Karen's trying to control the whole neighborhood?" Linda nodded slowly. "There's talk she's trying to annex more properties, get more members under her thumb. But no one has proof. We're all afraid of what she might do if we challenge her." Mark felt a chill. This was bigger than he thought. That night, he scanned through more HOA meeting minutes online. Vague references to boundary disputes and enforcement actions popped up again and again, always led by Karen. Mark's inbox buzzed. Another anonymous text. "You're poking the hornet's nest. Don't say we didn't warn you." He stared at the message, heart pounding. But now he had a weapon, knowledge. Karen's authority was illegitimate over him. If he played it right, he could turn the tables. The question was how, and at what cost. The next HOA meeting was held in the community center, a modest building with fluorescent lights humming overhead and rows of folding chairs set in neat lines. Mark entered cautiously, unsure what to expect. He was a newcomer here, an outsider stepping into a web woven tight with fear and control. Karen sat at the head table, clipboard and laptop ready, her expression as sharp as ever. The room hummed with murmurs. Neighbors avoided Mark's eyes, their silence almost louder than words. When the meeting began, Karen launched into her usual litany of rule violations and enforcement plans. Her voice was authoritative, every sentence laced with a sharp edge of command. But tonight, Mark wasn't just a spectator. He stood up. "Excuse me." Mark's voice echoed across the room. "I've reviewed the HOA boundaries and records. I'm not part of this HOA. Yet, I've been targeted repeatedly with threats, fines, and even police involvement." A hush fell. Karen's eyes narrowed, and a flicker of something unreadable crossed her face. One elderly woman, Mrs. Jenkins, cleared her throat. "I've been here 30 years, she said quietly, and I've seen Karen's behavior escalate. She's not just enforcing rules, she's using them to intimidate people." Another neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, chimed in. "I was fined last year for a fence color violation that was never in the guidelines. When I questioned it, Karen threatened to increase the fine." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. More residents spoke up, sharing stories of arbitrary rules, sudden inspections, and fines that seemed designed to break their spirits rather than protect property values. Karen's facade cracked. "These accusations are baseless," she said sharply. "I serve the community. If anyone feels unfairly treated, they can follow proper channels." Mark pressed on. "But the proper channels are controlled by you. You decide who's in and who's out, and you've been punishing those who don't fit your version of the neighborhood." Suddenly, the room's atmosphere shifted. People who had once been silent started nodding, exchanging glances. The weight of years of quiet fear began to lift. Karen's eyes flashed with anger, but before she could respond, Mark's phone buzzed discreetly. He glanced down and saw a message from the mysterious neighbor who had contacted him earlier. "Keep pushing. You're not alone." Mark felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about an entire community suffocated by fear. As the meeting ended, a few neighbors approached Mark quietly, offering support and sharing additional evidence, emails, photos, and letters documenting Karen's overreach. But as Mark walked to his car, a shadow fell across the parking lot. Karen appeared, her voice low and cold. "You've started something you can't finish, Mark," she warned. "This neighborhood has rules. Rules that you're about to learn don't bend for anyone." Mark squared his shoulders, the simmering tension turning into steel resolve. "This isn't over," he said. Karen disappeared into the night, but Mark knew her grip on the neighborhood was weakening. Still, the web was tangled, and the deeper he went, the more dangerous it became. Mark's growing alliance with the neighbors felt like a fragile thread of hope stretching across the neighborhood. Yet, the deeper he dug, the more tangled the web became. Late one evening, as rain tapped rhythmically against his windows, Mark sat huddled over a laptop, reviewing the stack of documents neighbors had handed him. Emails from Karen to the HOA board members spoke of strategic enforcement and expansion plans. But one file caught his eye, a scanned letter from the County Zoning Commission. The letter detailed an investigation into the Willow Creek HOA's boundaries and authority. According to the letter, the HOA had been under scrutiny for overstepping its jurisdiction, encroaching on properties that legally weren't theirs to govern. Mark's heart pounded. Could this be the reason Karen had singled him out? Was he just another victim of her overreach? Determined to learn more, Mark decided to visit the county zoning office the next day. The clerk, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, handed Mark public records and maps. As Mark flipped through the documents, a pattern emerged. Karen had been pushing the HOA's boundaries unofficially, applying rules and fines to homes well outside their legal limits. "What's the point of all this?" Mark asked. The clerk shrugged. "Control. Power. Some HOAs want to keep tight control over their communities, sometimes even beyond their rights." Mark's mind reeled. If Karen's actions were illegal, he had a way to fight back, but exposing her would mean stirring up a hornet's nest. Back at home, Mark's phone buzzed. Another message from the anonymous neighbor. "Watch your back. She doesn't take kindly to exposure." The warning sent a chill down his spine. That night, a loud crash outside jolted Mark awake. He looked out to see a row of his flower pots smashed on the driveway. Someone was sending a message. The next morning, Mark found a note taped to his front door, written in sharp, angry handwriting. "Stop digging, or else." Fear mingled with anger. Karen's reach was longer and darker than he'd imagined. But Mark refused to be intimidated. He shared the threats with the neighbors who'd supported him. They exchanged worried looks but stood firm. Then, during a neighborhood watch meeting, Mark presented his findings: maps, letters, and photos of the vandalism. Whispers filled the room as residents realized how deeply Karen's control had penetrated their lives. An older man cleared his throat. "We need to hold her accountable." A woman nodded. "We can't let fear rule us." The seeds of rebellion were planted. But as Mark looked around the room, he knew this battle was far from over. Karen wasn't just a stern HOA president. She was a force that had twisted rules to serve her own ends. And now, she was fighting back. The neighborhood was buzzing with whispered plans and cautious optimism. Mark had become an unlikely leader, rallying neighbors who had long suffered in silence. Together, they were organizing petitions, documenting abuses, and preparing to challenge Karen's tyrannical hold on the community. But Karen wasn't idle. She was watching, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. One gray morning, Mark received a notice in his mailbox, an official-looking document stamped with the county seal. His hands trembled as he opened it. It was a lawsuit. Karen, acting as president of the HOA, was suing Mark for trespassing on HOA property and harassment of HOA officials. The claim alleged that Mark had repeatedly violated HOA rules, ignored warnings, and intimidated board members. Mark's heart sank. The complaint was detailed and seemed carefully crafted to paint him as a troublemaker, a man out of control disrupting the peace. He called his lawyer, who advised caution. "This is a common tactic," she said. "Intimidate you with legal threats, drain your resources, scare you into silence." Mark knew the stakes had just been raised. This wasn't just about neighborhood rules anymore. It was a legal battle with potential to ruin him financially and emotionally. The community felt the tremors too. Some neighbors began to withdraw, afraid of getting caught in the crossfire. Others doubled down, determined to fight. Mark felt the weight of it all pressing down on him like a storm cloud. But then something unexpected happened. Linda, the neighbor who had first confided in him, knocked on his door one evening. In her hand was a thick folder. "I found these in my attic," she whispered, glancing nervously down the street. Old HOA records, before Karen took over. Mark flipped through the pages. Meeting minutes, letters, even financial reports, all pointing to Karen's manipulations. Expenses she'd funneled into personal projects, meetings where she'd pushed boundaries without board approval, and attempts to silence dissenters. This was the smoking gun. "We need to show this to the county and the other board members," Mark said, eyes blazing. But Karen was not done yet. That night, Mark's phone buzzed with a chilling message. "You think you have the truth? You're digging your own grave." Suddenly, headlights flooded Mark's living room as a car screeched to a halt outside. The engine revved and then sped away, leaving Mark shaken but unharmed. The war had become personal. Mark realized that Karen's fight was no longer just about the HOA. It was about power, control, and crushing anyone who dared defy her. But Mark was ready. With new evidence and the growing support of neighbors, he was determined to expose Karen once and for all. The question was, would the truth be enough to stop her before it was too late? The tension in Willow Creek had reached a boiling point. Mark had armed himself with evidence, allies, and determination, but Karen's shadow loomed larger than ever. The lawsuit, the threats, the intimidation, they were all tactics designed to silence him. Yet Mark refused to back down. The day of the special HOA board meeting arrived. The community center buzzed with nervous energy. Reporters had shown up, attracted by the unfolding drama. The county zoning official was in attendance, along with several board members who had grown uneasy about Karen's leadership. Mark stood before the assembled crowd, the folder of evidence in his hands. He began to speak, detailing Karen's manipulations, the illegal expansion of HOA boundaries, the misuse of funds, the targeted harassment of residents, and most shockingly, the fact that he wasn't even a member of her HOA. Gasps rippled through the room as Mark laid out the facts. Karen sat frozen, her usual poise shattered. She opened her mouth to speak, but the county official interrupted. "Ms. Harper," the official said sternly, "your actions have violated several county ordinances. We are recommending an immediate investigation and removal of your authority as HOA president." The room erupted in murmurs. Karen's face twisted in fury, but the momentum had shifted irreversibly. Then, just as the tension peaked, the county official unveiled another bombshell. Further investigation has revealed that the HOA's boundaries, as recorded officially, excludes several homes, including Mr. Marks. Therefore, any enforcement actions taken against him are invalid. Karen's eyes flickered with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Before she could react, the chairperson of the board, an elderly man named Mr. Simmons, stood. "This meeting is adjourned," he declared firmly. "Ms. Harper's powers are suspended pending full review. We will work with the county to restore trust and fairness to this community." As Karen stormed out, the crowd began to applaud. Neighbors who had once hidden in fear now exchanged relieved smiles and hopeful glances. Mark felt a wave of exhaustion and triumph wash over him. The battle had been long and painful, but justice had prevailed. Later, standing on his porch under the clear night sky, Mark received one final text from the anonymous neighbor who had supported him throughout. "Welcome to the neighborhood, Mark. You've earned it." A smile tugged at his lips. The fight had changed everything, not just for him, but for the entire community. And as the stars twinkled overhead, Mark knew one thing for certain. No one would ever intimidate this neighborhood again.